Well, ladies and gentlemen, it's 9:01. I was looking at the clock over here, and it appears that they're running maybe not quite bar time fast, but we'll get going anyway. It's a couple minutes past 9, and anybody else who comes in, we'll go through and do some introductions for anybody who shows up. But seeing as we do have a couple of maybe not as familiar faces to some of us, we'll go around and do introductions. Just want to make sure to recognize Representative Bob Paulson here, who is with us this morning, and then we do have one of our aldermen as well with Josh Walski. And City Manager Barry joining us just as we get going with introductions. So for those of you who don't know me, I'm sure everybody does, I'm Sean, and we'll just work our way around for short introductions.
Tim Mahalik.
Emily Schroeder with Dakota Business Lending.
Brecca Kramer with Odney.
Lindsay Ulrichsen with Sur Space and Planning Council.
Megan Ladenschlager with Strengthen ND.
Roger Reich.
Brian Billingsley, Community and Economic Development Director for the City of Minot.
Kelly Metalka, the City Clerk. Julie Moran, Minot.
Mark Lyman.
Is that all, Mark?
That's it.
Phyllis Burkhardt, the Minot CVB.
John Coughlin.
Ryan Kuhn, Minot CVB.
Chad Wright, Minot CVB.
Bob Paulson.
Kim Coatsman, Bank of North Dakota.
Stephanie Hoffert, the Minot Area Development Corporation.
Kathy Oz, Excel Energy.
John McMartin, the Chamber.
Neil Gush, Preferred Partners Real Estate.
Well, good. Go ahead there, Tom.
Thank you. I'm Tom Barry. I'm the City Manager for the city. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
You bet. First and foremost, I appreciate everybody taking time out on a Monday morning. I think the last couple of meetings we've seen with the stakeholders groups going from very large numbers when we first had a couple of meetings that were out at job service and even in this room to the numbers that are slowly kind of dwindling down. Believe it or not, that was anticipated just as we see some of the fire kind of start really hot for some and slowly diminish, but we want to make sure that everyone does understand with the stakeholders group. This is not exclusive by any means, and any person, business, or other community-minded members are invited to come and sit in and not only listen, but also go ahead and participate within these discussions. It's been quite a while since we've gotten together as a stakeholders group. We had tried to put one of these together in May with everyone's schedules between graduation time and the different business meetings that were taking place not only around the state but around the country, and in our case over in Norway. It just was an impossibility to get everybody together. So what we were looking at is helping facilitate what we're hoping to have anyways, quarterly meetings every year, so that every 2 to 3, 4 months that we can get together and as a large group and really discuss everything that's been going on within the working groups, with the steering committees and the other individual projects that are going on that were identified through the International Economic Development white papers that were developed. Is there anyone here, and I should probably ask that from the beginning, with this whole group came together because of the International Economic Development Council's suggestion for essentially identifying some gaps within our community, which led to the stakeholders group and then the working committee. Is there anybody in here that isn't familiar with how this whole process came to be? If I can give a quick recap, but I think everybody's pretty familiar with that. With that, we have a number of working groups that are continuing to progress, and then we also have, of course, our stakeholders group and as well as our steering committee. But for the working groups, of course, we've got Mr. Tim Mahalik, who we had put in charge of kind of helping facilitate all of the different funneling of information and organization, and we're happy to have Tim still with us. I know he had suggested a little while back that he's got a few things going on, that he's taking more time away with his not only business but other appointments on the state side. So Tim, we appreciate that you're still here, and we're working towards getting, I think, a replacement for you. But for the time being, I think I'll turn things over for kind of a quick recap of where we're at with our working groups and some of the different directional pieces of information that are moving.
Thanks, Sean, and I appreciate the attempt to replace me, so to speak. I intend to stay engaged. As I was just sharing with Sean, the State Board of Higher Education appointment has certainly taken up more time than I anticipated, but it's interesting work, and it's things that I think are crucial to the city of Minot and the western part of the state. So I think my involvement there is as important, if not more important than what's going on here, although this is very important work as well. I appreciate all the work that everybody in this room has done. There's been a tremendous amount of activity over the last 12 months. We've done a lot. The creation of the white papers really sets the course for what we're trying to accomplish going forward. And what I was hoping this morning for those chairpersons that are here, they can give an update on their technical team committees. I know we've had some wins, I think, some really great things happen. The ability to get some funds out of the Magic Fund that allow us to move forward with some things. So as I call on you, if you give an update on your specific committee, things you've been up to, and just a recap of where we're at and the wins that you had accomplished to date, and we can have some discussions on that. For some reason, Roger, I always have you at the top of the list, and so if you can give me an update on the Downtown Technical Committee, I'd appreciate that.
Yeah, the downtown's been meeting probably monthly. We've gone through a couple different surveys. We've done a customer survey, and we've also done business owners and property owner survey. And since Lindsay and Megan were the big part of that, I'm going to defer some of those answers to those two. How's that? That's pretty good, huh?
Kate, you want to go first?
Good morning. We have been kind of plugging away. We had a really great response to our community survey, and then we did our downtown survey too, where we really hit the pavement and went door to door with handouts of, here's this survey that's available to take. So we also, Briselda from our office and Nancy from Ward County and Jeanette Larshis went to Great Falls a couple weekends ago, and they visited with their downtown organization, their bid district, and they had, there was another group, just a casual group of folks, volunteers who, they're called the Downtown Chicks. They had an opportunity to meet with them as well, and so they packed a ton of meetings and a ton of discussions into about a 2-day time period. So they're still talking about all of those things. So they're going to put that into a formal report that'll all be a part of the strategic plan as well. And they're probably what, we say Great Falls kind of looks like us. What we look like right now, they probably looked like that 10 years ago. So hopefully we can kind of take some of their takeaways and learn from some of the mistakes that they made, so we don't have to be there in 10 years. We can be there sooner. So, but yeah, we're still plugging away. We still have a really good attendance rate at the meetings. Everyone's really engaged, and it's good.
And we did, for the community survey piece, thank you for all who shared it. We had just under 1,000 unique responses to that, which was not quite as many as we hoped, but certainly a pretty good sample size. And when we looked or analyzed all of the data, it seemed like things started to fall in some pretty specific buckets. People in Minot really want food. They like food. They want different food, ethnic food. They want different types of places to eat and different types of places to shop for their groceries. They care about the aesthetics of downtown. So how do we make downtown a beautiful, welcoming place, and how do we keep it clean? And how do we introduce variety in terms of the types of retail that we have down there, types of events, and different types of art convening. So we did a little bit of a downtown roadmap, and just a few strategies that were identified that we're thinking will make its way through the final plan. Simple things like a comprehensive trash and trash can strategy. That's one thing that we heard, is that if you're downtown, there's no place to even put your trash, which leads to more littering. Mitigating urban glow, looking at different types of code enforcement for snow removal, community, or developing a community art strategy, cohesive downtown marketing strategy, dedicated food truck space, etc. So some really productive, practical, and applicable strategies came out of that meeting, things that we can move forward on tomorrow. So we're really excited to see how this progresses forward.
Megan, Roger, Lindsay, could you follow up a little bit on the, we had some discussion about the business survey, and I guess from my perspective, a little bit disappointed in the response from our downtown merchants, and we asked them, to give them an opportunity to respond. I don't think the sample size was there, and if you would follow up on that, I'd appreciate it.
Sure. So we had 36 responses on the business survey. I know just kind of anecdotally, I heard kind of after the fact that people were still nervous that somehow we might be sharing the information with others. And we put in there, we verbally told everyone that it would be confidential. It would all just kind of be bunched together into this information. But there were still that fear that this would get out publicly, that, their individual answers. So, and I don't know if everyone felt that way. There was just one or two that shared that. So we were disappointed, especially we spent an entire day downtown going door to door, to probably over 300 businesses. If they weren't there, we stuck flyers under the door or in the door. We also noted which ones were not open that day, and we had our interns go back the next day or the next day to share the information. So it was a little bit disappointing, I guess, in the response from the businesses. There was also a few things from the community survey with the business survey that was a little bit conflicting. So it's interesting, but we'll note it in the plan, and so we still have a lot of work to do downtown in engaging the neighborhood to come together. And building trust.
Yeah, thank you. And I thought that was important for this group to know, because the sample size wasn't, I think, what we hoped for. On the community side, close to 1,000 responses was a sample size we felt good about. So we got to figure out, again, a better way to get the downtown community to work together as we look to move this process forward. And, keep that in mind as you talk to the downtown merchants and vendors that, we're in this together. Brian, I may give you a chance to talk a little later on, because that's what this is all about. As we look to move things forward, we got to work together, and we have to build that trust for downtown. So thank you for that update. Lindsay, I'll continue on with you, if you would, regarding the downtown toolbox and where you're at with that.
Sure. So we have not been meeting monthly like the downtown team has, but we do meet. We meet every once in a while. Our last meeting we had was April 25th, and we've all actually been in discussions and been a part of the application to the Magic Fund to start an interest buy-down program. So the entire committee was involved in that, behind the scenes, in front of the scenes, and so that's a big win for our team to be able to move forward with that. We also have been talking about how we take a more comprehensive approach, and not just a financial toolbox, but a resource toolbox, so that it's not just financials, but what other services and what other resources are there for small businesses. And so we want to look a little bit more on a more comprehensive approach. And then we have talked a lot about putting a resource together that's really comprehensive for the region, so that businesses from all over know what's out there or know what applies to them. And we were actually hoping that we could have that already by now, but with time, we've written grants to be able to do that, and we haven't been successful. So that's one thing that we think is really important, because it's information sharing, but we have to do it in a strategic way, so that we're not just dumping 200 potential opportunities on someone that they have to research or that they have to look into. So it's important that we can point people in the right direction and save them time. So that's one thing we still really want to do. And we looked, just like we talked about previously, there's a lot of overlap. And so, one of the things, our number one solution was to launch an awareness and communications campaign. And so the One Brand is doing that. And that's who we had identified as the action lead on that. And we're happy to support that as well. So That's about what we've been up to. We're really excited about the interest buy-down program, but we also know that there's a lot of other programs and other resources that we can tap into as well moving forward.
Thank you. Any questions for Lindsay? I mean, that's good work, and, I think one of the things that, it has been a while since we met, but we continue to stay active in the technical team, so I appreciate that. Foot traffic, which Ellie DeLoyers chairs, I think my last conversation with Ellie was really that they are kind of focused on waiting to see what's going to happen with some of the things downtown, certainly regarding gathering space, and I hope to get an update on that later on, but how as we look to move forward, and where they fit in the picture as we look to move forward. I know they want to be engaged. As we all know, the park system has done a great job, and we want to certainly engage them as well moving forward. The one brand, one voice, Brecca, whether you want to touch on that. I know, Ryan, you've been involved in the Magic Fund application where we're at, and so whoever wants to run with that.
Yeah, I'll probably tee it up and pass it along. As you guys know, there was an active group as far as meeting on the one brand. Those activities stopped as far as with it once the steering committee came together. I know that that was kind of adopted and moved under that. And so Visit Minot has actually taken the lead along with other partner organizations. So Ryan would have the most recent update.
Good morning. So Visit Minot with MADC and the Chamber moved forward with an RFQ that actually closed last Wednesday. We had gone to the Magic Fund prior to that and received a funding request of a not-to-exceed amount so that we can utilize that money to bring in a partner to help facilitate that One Brand, One Message campaign. We had 7 respondents to that, and so our committee is going to be getting together this week to move forward on reviewing those, and then obviously scheduling interviews and moving forward from there with that project. So a lot of good things have come out of it, and we'll see what those RFQs look like and how people responded. And the goal of the RFQ versus an RFP was to allow the agencies of response to provide innovative solutions for the funding that we were given, and then that way we didn't have to take the lowest bidder. An innovative response is really what we need to be creative in coming up with that one brand strategy moving forward. So that's where we're at with that.
Ryan, what kind of time frame are we working through on this process?
So now that that RFQ has closed, the goal was to have a contract in place by the end of the month. That includes having it reviewed by our lawyer as well as the city lawyer, and then getting that contract back to the city. So the goal is to have a contract in place by July 1.
Any other questions? Discussion? Lindsay?
Ryan, were you happy with the response, with the number of responses that you received?
I had a lot of, I'm a nerd, so I like to get into the numbers and my analytics from the page, and we had a lot of opens all over the country, actually, which was really interesting to me. So as far as North Carolina, Pittsburgh, the 7 respondents we did have, 3 were from in-state, the rest are from out-of-state, and so I haven't dove in 1,000% into a lot of the reports yet, but what we do have, everyone's approached it a little differently, so it'll be fun to sit down as a group and review and weigh what needs to happen for the community and with the options we've been given. So I think once we sit down, we'll be able to weed through some of that stuff. Limiting it to 8 pages certainly made it tough on the agencies, but we didn't want all the extra stuff, so hopefully the very focused responses will help us in moving forward with what we need.
Great. You had 7 responses, you said?
Yes.
That's great.
Other questions? Yep.
Maybe just for Ryan, I know we talked about adding Brian, a council member. Have those individuals been reached out to as far as when you guys, because the end of the month is obviously going to come up pretty quick. We only have a couple weeks left. Have those individuals been selected? And I don't know if it got finalized. Maybe Josh can, a member of the community, a citizen. That idea was kicked around as well of having them as be a part of that selection committee. Just want to know that we're up against the clock, I guess, if we're looking for with less than 2 weeks left. So
So from my understanding, based on how everything went through city council, there were 3 parties that I believe need to be by appointment. So as of now, that hasn't happened yet. We are ready to proceed and move forward. We don't want to hold up this process. So if you have ideas, we'll take them, but otherwise, we're ready to move forward.
I think we'll chat after this and then look for that even tonight at council.
Thank you.
Thank you. Again, good stuff. A lot of activity behind the scenes, and we continue to make progress, which is good to see. Next committee would be the incubator committee. Chuck Barney's not here, but Megan, I think you're prepared to give us an update on where you're at with that.
Sure. So the incubator committee has been active over the last few months, and we wrote a grant to USDA Rural Development under the Rural Business Opportunity Grant in order to do a feasibility study for the incubator to help understand where the incubator should be and what types of programs should be within it, and also what type of structure it should have. And we were successful in receiving that grant. We just found out a few weeks ago. So Minot State University will be managing that grant, and we will be looking similarly, not necessarily an RFQ process, but an RFP process for a consultant to come in and support us in developing what that incubator should look like. We're going to have a really heavy focus on sustainability of the incubator itself. Being a nonprofit, I know that there's not a ton of grant opportunities available, so how we make that building or that program or that staff member cash flow is going to be incredibly important for the overall success of the incubator. So we look forward to more information coming forward as that progresses. We have just a few items to outline with Minot State as far as approach when it comes to the funds management piece of it, but we are happy to report that we are successful and moving forward.
Thank you. Questions? I know that that's another committee and activity that goes on kind of behind the scenes, but again, progress being made as we look forward, so it's good stuff to hear. Questions? The last committee as part of the community stakeholders group is the private investment that's headed by Kevin Black. I see Kevin's not here today. I know, again, that group has been active, but really kind of waiting to see how things move forward. I also know Kevin opened up an office down in Texas. He's busy in Williston. So he's a tough guy to get a hold of, which is keeping us busy. The nice thing is he continues to keep his office here in Minot and looks to grow that too as he moves forward. So that's one of those stories we like to see and like to look to move ahead. I don't know if anybody else has any comment on the private investment committee. Anyone here from that committee? If not, that wraps up the 6 committees that are currently in operation, currently working, looking to move this process forward. I thought, Brian, not to call on you, but to call you out a little bit, to get your thoughts, what you've seen to date, how these 6 committees fit together, versed on your experience from Idaho. And if you'd like to give an update, I'd love to hear it.
Sure. Yeah, I've been with the city now for about 2.5 months, and I haven't really had a chance to meet with all the committees. I've had a chance to meet with most of the people in this room, though. And if anyone hasn't met with me yet, please pull me aside after the meeting. I'd be glad to exchange business cards and meet with you in the future. We did have a branding effort in Idaho, in the city that I worked for about 3 years ago. And we rebranded the city, came out with the new city logos, and we went as far as even using color charts and fonts and things like that. So I'm familiar with rebranding efforts, and of course our downtown. We had a lot of downtown activity, redevelopment activity, and certainly can be of assistance there. I did attend a meeting of Lindsay's committee about a month ago, and I also developed vision and mission statements for my department, and I've used some of the words that you'd used for your downtown rebranding efforts in our vision statements as well. So I'm not very familiar with the incubator efforts and the private investment committees, but like I said, as I spend more time here, I will definitely reach out to those committees and spend time working with those folks as well.
Thanks, Brian. Appreciate it. Again, a lot of activity, a lot going on. Not easily seen, but people continue to work to look towards a positive outcome. I think the one thing we need to continue to understand is it takes time. It's not an overnight flip the switch and tomorrow we look like Great Falls looks today. It's going to take time. We've got to keep plugging away, and the effort is there, the energy is there, as I've talked about in the past, and I appreciate seeing that, and I like seeing that, and that's really what it's going to take to move this process forward. With that, Mr. Mayor, I'll turn it back over to you.
All right, appreciate it. Thank you so much. Also taking a look at number 4 on our agenda is a new technical team charter, and this is somewhat kind of the re-evolution of what had I guess, been purposed prior within our white paper and working team groups, putting back together a team that is going to solely focus on the Trinity buildings downtown. I've already had discussions with John here in the room, and we're starting to formulate some ideas on some different folks that we can bring into this, and the entire idea is to task some folks with dreaming a little bigger and outside of the box on how we might be able to come up with some ideas of how some of these buildings are either going to be repurposed or what future land use for those after Trinity moves to its new campus in Southwest Minot. Look to hopefully get that stood up and have a first meeting, I would say, by the end of the month. Some of the different folks that are going to be making this up is not only people that work within the economic development, but general investors, contractors that might have some, I think, broader range view of just, let's say, status quo, and general people from downtown and others that are just genuinely interested in seeing what we can come up with, that we can get some things or plans in place long before the time ever comes to fruition when Trinity's ready to move on. So we can look for some updates on that, I think, at our next complete stakeholders group meeting, as well as the steering committee meetings with that too. With the steering committee itself, and this is just a little bit of an overview as well, as the different, if you're not entirely familiar with it, as the different working groups and white papers evolved, the steering committee did come together, not only taking those suggestions, but also some of the broader key points and working through those, whether it's helping direct some of the city staff or working with those working groups. That is essentially where we came out with the applications to the Magic Fund and some of the other working pieces. Before we get into open discussion, I might just actually turn over to City Manager Barry here for a quick update on the downtown gathering space. Some folks have been a little bit interested in that. I know that we've had some discussions at City Council, and likely are going to have a little more discussion on that tonight at City Council as well.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a couple of things about the steering committee, and then we can move to the gathering space. The steering committee did meet several times since our last stakeholders group meeting, and just so everyone's familiar, the steering committee is comprised of the mayor, the city manager, a representative from the chamber, which is Mr. McMartin, representative from MADC, which is Stephanie Hoffert, and then a member representing Visit Minot, which is Phyllis Burkhart, and also a member from the Downtown Business and Professional Association, which is Margie Bolton, who's the president. It also included Tim as our project manager, and we added Brian Billingsley, since the city, as you know, has reorganized the community development, sort of planning and building components of our operational function, and included economic development with a formal position. And we've advertised for that economic development specialist position, and are still going through the recruitment process right now. Because we don't have that position filled, we've asked Brian to step in as an interim to help fill that role and provide technical support to the steering committee. It is envisioned that once the position is filled, the economic development position is filled, that we'll be able to allow Brian to get back to his normal duties and have that specialist step in as as a technical resource for the steering committee. Some of the work that the steering committee has been doing has been going through the Consolidated Gaps summary document that was developed and agreed to by this committee. And we've identified various roles and responsibilities that each of the members of the steering committee might be able, through their organizations, to either expand or to start new, or we talked even about recommendations for alternatives for some of that work. That work is being finalized currently, and on our next meeting, I imagine that we'll have that pretty well settled down. As it relates to the gathering space,
Tom?
Yes.
Tom, over here, John.
John.
I thought we had added sewer space and planning to the steering committee as well.
Yes, John, thank you for that. We did add Sewer Space and Planning Council, which is represented, of course, by Cindy Burleson. So, and I apologize because we did not have Sewer Space and Planning Council on the original list, and so that's why I missed it. I apologize for the original list, but Lindsay's been a great addition. I think because of her and her organization's involvement in a number of different things in our community and certainly within the city, it made a lot of sense to add Sewer Space and Planning Council. Thank you for that, John. I apologize, Lindsay. Okay, gathering space really quickly. We are still very excited about what the potential is in and around the gathering space. It has been frustrating, as you may imagine, working within the federal rules. That is never really easy. There are frustrations, I know, by property owners, frustrations by the community, as well as the staff and our elected officials on all of this. I assure you that we're working as diligently and productively as we can, given those rules and given the time frames that we're operating under. As you all know, the federal dollars for the gathering space total about $6 million. They expire at the end of September in 2022, and so we are on this timeline to use or lose those dollars. We did do an amendment to the agreement we had with HUD, which allows us to take a portion of that $6 million and apply it to acquisitions and relocations. That was not contemplated in the original application, so that took some time. We have been negotiating since February with various property owners. There are 9 properties that are involved that we have to acquire or entertain in some level. 2 of those are city-owned properties, leaving 7 privately owned properties that have to be negotiated. I can tell you that negotiations are ongoing. There are some that have tentatively reached agreement with the city, others who are very far apart with the city right now, given the HUD guidance. And so we continue to work through those. Of course, we will not sign any purchase and sale agreements until we get all of the properties that are needed to make this move forward, because it doesn't make sense for us to purchase 1 or 2 properties and find out we can't get the rest. So they'll all be contingent, essentially, on some number or arrangement of properties, depending on how we can configure this thing to ensure that we fulfill our obligations with HUD, but that we also provide for our community and for our downtown a high-quality, meaningful gathering space for all. So my understanding is that there's been some talk at the city council level that in regards to the negotiations that there may be a deadline placed. I think that's going to be discussed if we look at the city council agenda this evening. I think the council will be discussing what deadline should be placed, if any, on the gathering space negotiations, because we are under a timeline, and this isn't something that we can continue indefinitely. If we can't reach agreement with a certain number of key property owners to make this viable, then the city has no choice but to move on. So I think that'll be the conversation tonight. I'm not sure exactly how that will go, but I think it's an important conversation because we do not want, as a community or the downtown, to miss out on this great opportunity that we've been provided with the NDR funding. So I guess I'll pause there and take any questions if you have any on either of those 2 subjects.
And seeing as this is going to be discussed at City Council tonight, okay.
Okay.
But also related to NDR, Mayor, Mr. Berry, update on the wayfinding contract, which was put out, I think, 2 or 3 months ago or something like that, in terms of where we're at.
Thank you, Alderman Walski. I don't have an update exactly on where we are on the contract, but I can tell you about the concept of the project. And then I can get the update and have that for you tonight at council if you'd like. But what Alderman Walski is talking about is we were originally looking at a wayfinding study and program so that we could improve the way people got around downtown, essentially signage project, right? You know, where do you go if you want to find this? Where do you go if you want to find that? I challenged the staff to include a historical component, which I understand is being included or was included in the RFP, which would allow us to expand the concept to something more innovative, which would be something like a historical walking tour, which would allow us to, you know, maybe go to a certain location and through an application bring up on your phone what this building used to look like and what it used to be used for at a certain point in time, and then what it's being used for, and you know, over the time, and what it's being used for now, for example, or you know, to give us a little bit more of an enriching history and a little bit more of a draw to the downtown as it relates to kind of, you know, what is downtown all about? And we have some really cool buildings downtown. We have some great historical uses and some fantastic stories about some of the infrastructure downtown. So we wanted to include that in the wayfinding project as well. I'm told that that was included. I need to get an update exactly on where we are with the RFQ and the contracting process. I can have that for you tonight, Mr. Wolski.
Any other questions regarding the downtown gathering space or anything directly on that? Alderman Pittner.
Thank you, Mayor. I guess I just wanted to maybe share some thoughts on so what everyone, some of the things have been brought up, and a lot of obviously encouraging news and progress. The one thing that I find, and I guess I just want to share these comments, a little disconcerting is maybe some of the lack of engagement from business owners downtown. Because we see all this investment that we want to make downtown and a rebranding that I'm sure will include downtown and a gathering space and the staff's time and effort that's really being expended, and we can't even get our downtown merchants to reply to a survey. I think that's really really concerning for me, and to make maybe some progress in these areas. I'm hesitant because if we can't even get our merchants to care about it, you know, and the rest of the community, there's a lot of other areas that effort can be expelled in. So that's just kind of my takeaway from it. I don't like to focus on negative things, but with all these other positive progress we're making, I'd really like to see some of those merchants get on board. If the city's going to make investments even into gathering spaces, and there's citizens are saying we want places to put our trash, we want places to have, you know, to bring foot traffic down here for food trucks and all this, and like I say, I'll say it again, I've said it before, I think a bid district should be discussed, and I think could really help address some of these even citizen issues that they have, that we're seeing in these surveys. So just wanted to put my 2 cents out there and let that be known, and we're going to talk about it tonight. I'm sure I'll be willing to share it again.
Alderman Pittner, and I think for the rest of the group, just for a little bit of context as well, seeing as you had brought up the bid district, I know that conversation has taken or has happened openly at the Downtown Business Professionals Association meetings, so they are discussing exactly that. Where they're at, I'm not exactly sure. I think it was identified very clearly that if that was going to be proposed, it was going to come from downtown, that it was going to be their lead, seeing as it is a pretty substantial investment, I guess, in the minds of every business owner down there, and has to be very clearly identified if it were to move forward on their behalf, what it would be used for. Just for a little back context as well, with the downtown gathering space, three locations were originally identified as potential spaces or locations for that project, simply because we needed 2 acres of space. Originally, as it were, that money was not to be used for acquisition, but as City Manager Barry had pointed out, we have been able to allocate a little bit of money for that. However, that 2 acre or as close to 2 acres as we can get really does limit our footprint downtown. If you take a look at an aerial map, Google Earth search becomes very, very apparent very quickly on potential locations for that. Now, through that site selection process and community outreach, again, Site 2 was selected. we will work, I think, until a prudent deadline, which we will discuss tonight and not discuss any further, seeing as we have a quorum here of aldermen. But I think when it does come to that, the community should be aware of the 3 different locations as we move forward on this one. Site 2, of course, is what we're working on. The other 2 locations, we can look back as being the one that is over by Broadway, the other one that is over right across from 3rd Street. Closest I can give you is near Ebenezer's, in that area right across from the railroad tracks. For context, so that everyone is aware when we discuss on those locations. From this point, I would very much appreciate any open discussions or questions on where we're moving forward, how we're moving forward, or just general questions that you have on this process that was developed through that International Economic Development Council, the working groups, the white papers, the steering committee. This is the opportunity to engage. John.
I would just offer an observation on concern or would like to see more responses in the business survey. But when you look at downtown and the way downtown has functioned or not functioned over the years, from the time the IEDC team was in town to today, you jumped ahead light years. The downtown groups are functioning, things are happening behind the scenes. Is it completely fixed? Is it completely there yet? No, but they have made leaps and bounds to get there. And so there is a lot of good work going on. There's a lot of good things being done by the downtown groups.
I think that was apparent, John. Thank you for pointing that out as well. I mean, not just some of the gatherings. I think they had the Relay for Life just downtown. You take a look at some of the different food festivals they've had down there, the Peddlers Market and other things. I couldn't agree more, John, that there has been significant progress. But of course, with anything, there's always more to be done. And I think that falls within any area within the city itself. You know, whether we're talking the community as a whole or just individual departments. Mark.
Just a quick observation for context as we're discussing the downtown stuff and work with Lindsay did with the businesses. I served on that board for 4 years, right during the part of the downtown construction. And one of the initiatives that Roger or someone else put out there that I helped with was trying to get responses from businesses, and we ended up going out to directly knocking on doors of 150 to 175 businesses, not just on Main Street. There's not that many right on Main Street. You have to go quite a ways off Main Street to get even over 100 businesses. And it was one-on-one contact. It was face-to-face. It was saying hi to a business owner, and then it was followed up. And of the 175 or so surveys that we put out, it was a simple about 10-question survey, asking them about what do they prioritize, what events do they enjoy, what events can they get behind. We had 50 responses. And part of that is the reality that some of those businesses it's a one-man shop. It's a guy who has an insurance company, who doesn't invest the same way that Starving Rooster does, for example, or 10 North Main. We have a lot of good restaurants, but I don't know that I got the Thai restaurant, for example, which gets good business. I don't think that they participated in the survey, if I remember correctly. And yet, they would care about a lot of different events. For some people, they just don't do surveys. So there's a certain percentage of people we're never going to get. I'd be shocked if we got over 50%. I mean, floor. And so some of that's content. We'll vote in the city election. If we had 20% of the people in town vote in the city election, wouldn't that be great? So if we're asking for something that's over 20% on our surveys, how reasonable is that? Just a thought from my experience before you go working on it. With some of the same downtown businesses, and those that respond are quite passionate.
Very well said. Thank you, Mark. John?
My question is for the Downtown Technical Committee, and based on what I've heard, I think I know the answer, but did any conversations show any opportunity for putting together a business improvement district?
So we purposefully kind of left some of those discussions out of the technical team. It was certainly discussed, don't get me wrong, but we really left that in the DBPA's hands. The technical team is made up of members in and outside of DBPA, and we, I think Ryan Ackerman has put a lot of time into researching and putting different scenarios together. So in order to make sure that everything was communicated properly, we really left that to DBPA. The other piece to that is we had discussions on whether or not we should bring up a bid district in the survey, or whether we should bring it up when we're going door to door. But there's just too much information that's not there yet, and we didn't want to scare anyone away, and we didn't want to miscommunicate anything, because there's so many moving parts to the bid district, and so we didn't want to miscommunicate with anyone. So,
And I think one thing that really clearly we'd like to have come forward is that those conversations are happening. So there is concerted effort by DBPA to bring that forward. So
There's nobody here from the DPA board, but they are doing that conversation, and I know that they've met over the last 3 or 4 months trying to, when they do bring that forward, they want a good package so that it's going to, go out to the businesses, and it's going to be a good show on that part from the DPPA board. So,
Paul, you had a question?
Just to follow up with Lindsay or Megan or Roger, when you guys met with Little Falls, you guys had touched on that, you talked about their bid district. Can you guys give us some, like what benefits their downtown has seen from that, or kind of what they're doing with that?
Sure. So right now with their bid district, it's actually its own organization. It's not done through the downtown Great Falls, but they share an office, so they work closely. So the organization, they have a downtown Great Falls, and then they have their Great Falls bid district, and they really separate it by the downtown Great Falls kind of focuses on those events and activities and things like that downtown, and the bid district focuses on beautification, and so they separate those duties, and then they work together with that, and it works for them. I know other cities do it differently, so but it has been working really well for them. And we will still, the bid district will still be within the strategic plan. It won't, that will still be a recommendation. I think we're all supportive of that, and we all know it should be in there. So that will be included in there too.
Seeing as we're also online, if I could, just for context, I'll have the city manager just very briefly recap for the folks at home exactly how this process with the bid district works, who it benefits, and all the details quickly.
Great, thank you, Mr. Mayor. So a bid district is a business improvement district, and it is a district that a group of businesses would decide if they wanted to be taxed additionally for enhanced services that the city or some contractor could provide for the benefit of the district. And essentially, as you all know, the city provides certain basic services to all businesses and homeowners and whatnot throughout the community. If there is a desire for those services to be enhanced by a group, particularly businesses in this particular case, they can petition the city to help them develop a business improvement district. And there is a certain process that has to be gone through in order for the businesses to organize and for the majority of the property owners to agree that, yes, they would be willing to accept a higher taxing rate in exchange for those taxes being used on the enhanced services that the city, or as I mentioned, a subcontractor to the business improvement district could provide for them. So you know, this is important because a lot of communities, particularly thriving downtowns, do have business improvement districts. And it is a fund that they use for either beautification, facade improvements, low-interest loan programs, sidewalk improvements, I mean, you name it. It could be anything. But the district has to have a governing organization that identifies what those funds would be used for and has to collect the funds and then use those funds for those particular uses within the dollars that have been sanctioned by the Business Improvement District as extra tax levy. So the city has been working with the Downtown Business Professionals Association. We've also been included at one of the executive board meetings where they presented to the mayor and I their idea for the Business Improvement District and their approach that they'd like to take in order to bring various businesses into the education loop and to try to build some support for this. I can tell you that the threshold is pretty high for getting a business improvement district passed. And that's going to be, I think, the challenge is trying to help the majority of property owners downtown to understand what the benefits are, what the uses are, and what the outcomes could be of a business improvement district. Essentially, if that threshold can be met and the businesses do agree, yes, we like to tax ourselves some certain portion, which they get to decide based upon the service level that they want, then they'll petition the city council to essentially formulate the business improvement district, and then we would go and we would be doing the assessing and we would be doing the administration. There'd be some small costs, of course, associated with that gets applied to the business improvement district as an administrative fee, and then essentially that thing's set up and it kind of takes a life of its own. It has its own board and it moves forward, and it's actually a very wise strategy for a downtown to sort of coalesce around some enhanced or strategic initiative that's going to benefit the downtown. So it's exciting. I think the information that the mayor and I have seen that the Downtown Business Professionals Association has put together seems very solid. It's impressive, and I think that the way they're thinking about this and the organization and the approach that they'd like to take is well thought out, and we're hopeful that that they're successful in this process because, of course, that means great things to our downtown as well.
Thank you. John, you had a question?
No, not a question, just a comment. Tom, I think your explanation was very good. You used, and I think everybody around the table knows, you used property owners and businesses, and that they may not be synonymous. There are some businesses that are very invested in downtown that rent their space. They would not have a vote. They may be promoters of a bid district, but they do not have a vote in that case. It is the property owners. And so part of the education effort that the Downtown Association is going through right now is reaching out and finding all of those property owners, some of whom may be absentee, living out of state. And they've got to convince the property owners of the merits of the bid district.
I'll throw another monkey wrench in that. How many LMI apartments do we have? Low to moderate income apartments aren't owned by those residents. How are we communicating with these residents? We don't want to lose the LMI population that we have there that's supported well by some of that structure. And what's the balancing act for how do we support apartments being downtown? How many businesses get money from those people who live right above them or right next to them? Do we take that base out by raising taxes? By that group supporting it? I mean, I don't know what the answer is really there, but that's a whole other population that is really hard to reach from a communication standpoint, engagement standpoint. It's transient, they come and go, some of them we know well, many of them we don't know. So how do we communicate with that group too? It's a key part of our downtown.
And that's a very great point, Mark, and for the most part, that is going to be the challenge that is put forth from the Downtown Business Professionals Association, seeing as we fully identified this is an uphill battle, and it's certainly not an easy proposal, but I think you've got a very good group of motivated individuals that are willing to do the legwork to at least make sure the education process is there and that as many contacts are made so that at the end of the day, you know, I hate to use the old analogy, you know, where the chips fall where they may, but it is every every possible effort to make sure that it's done as good as it can be the first time so that nobody's circling back around a few years down the road. Oh, Ryan.
I just have a question. So in terms of a bid district, that high threshold you were talking about, if you hit the threshold, do all business owners get taxed or only those within that's accepted the bid district?
All of the ones that have been, thank you. There you go. Thanks, Ryan. All of the ones that are identified in the district, if the threshold gets met, whether you agreed or not, as long as the threshold's met, everybody comes in. So part of the strategy that I think the Downtown Business Professional Association has to determine is who needs to be in this bid district and where do the boundaries get drawn up. And, you know, some of that is, you know, where's the best benefit going to be? You know, do you want to pull in people that are 6 blocks away? Does it make sense for them? Does it make sense for the core? Does it make sense for certain types of businesses, certain locations of businesses? But once that threshold's met, wherever the boundary's been developed, everybody comes in. And that's why it's such a high threshold, though. So there may be a couple attempts along these lines to develop a district, and depending upon where the votes are for the property owners, the district boundaries might change accordingly. So I think you could expect to see a couple iterations or attempts maybe. That's not uncommon in the development of these kinds of districts. And of course, what is the taxing rate is determined by what is the service level that the district wants. Maybe the district only needs $100,000 as an entire district because all they want to focus on is beautification. And that's great for $100,000 a year. But if they want enhanced snow removal, enhanced garbage services, if they want wayfinding signs and they want flowers and other sorts of things, and sidewalk improvements, I mean, maybe we're looking at $600,000, $700,000, $800,000 of an annual budget. That will then all have to be decided, you know, of course, before the district is formed, and that gets incorporated into the district's voting, essentially bylaws, if you will, as well. And then they make a decision. Yes, I'm willing to pay this much for this level of service, or no, maybe I don't want that full level of service. I'm willing to pay for this. And so these things kind of evolve. And even once they're formed, they evolve. And I think that's a good thing. It's important to make sure that the district serves the needs of the broader business and residential population of downtown.
One of the messages that we very adamantly conveyed not only to the downtown business professionals, but pretty much anybody in the downtown or within the city itself, is that this is their working group. If they have questions or need assistance in the process, we're more than happy to help provide that. But we fully recognize that this is going to be their issue to tackle, because it's going to come from the inner core, and certainly we recognize that they're the ones who have to get their own buy-in for this to be successful. But we're there for any kind of assistance in information or any other process that they may want. Any other questions or discussion within the bid district or other issues there? Josh?
Not on the bid district, just some recent personal outside perspective. I've been back in town about a week, and on my way back to Minot from a little brief holiday in Florida, I drove about 2,300 miles. I stopped in 21 different downtowns along the way just to get out of the car and make a quick assessment of a place and get a first impression. Minot's doing really, really well. We have a lot fewer parking lots in our downtown than I think a lot of places across the country, from the deep south through the high plains. We've been able to hang on to our historic core, I think, better than a lot of places. So I was really glad to see that. I did find a couple places that have really managed to gel and pull themselves together in ways that are extraordinary. I think we're probably 70 or 80% of the way there. And what I imagine being left for us is the very, very difficult and painstaking and tedious 20% of the finishing work, right? You know, when you build a house, it looks like it's done on the outside, but when you actually step inside, it's not done until it's polished and finished. And I think the places that have really stood out along the way have figured out that last 10 or 20%, but I think that's where we're at. We're right on the cusp of that finishing work. I will share that a couple things that stood out, like I said, were these little details, these coordinated expressions of pride. We have so many prideful people in Minot, this room being a great example of it. Even the downtown business owners who maybe are distrustful at this point in participating in our surveys, I know many of them, and I know that they are proud of this place, they are proud of their businesses, they are proud of their storefronts. We just need to get everybody kind of pulling together a little bit. And then as some final points, some topics that have been discussed today, we've got wayfinding, we've got one brand, we've got gathering space. These are 3 projects that right now are somewhat independent, but as they move forward, I think we need to be very intentional about seeing them move forward together so that they are all linked with each other, because they're so critically a part of the downtown, and there are opportunities. So some of them might be a little further ahead right now, maybe with the wayfinding, but as all of this stuff comes together, I think we need to be really careful about making sure that the gathering space goes with the one brand and the wayfinding goes with the one brand, and not get too far ahead on any of the individual pieces. So.
Thank you, Josh. Any?
Yeah.
Yes, please.
One last comment to follow up on what you just said, Josh, and I've said it, on more than one occasion. Don't let this group lose the energy that we have, because it might be another 25 years before you find it again, and I won't be here by then. Well, maybe I will. I don't know. But as I've talked about in the past, 25 years ago, we did do some downtown redevelopment without the energy that we have. Let's figure out a way to take this energy and get the development to go at the same time, because if we don't get this to happen, we're not going to see it again for quite a while. That's my fear. So, for what it's worth. And I appreciate all you're doing.
And to maybe follow up on Alderman Walski's point just a little bit, we purposefully also went out as we were visiting our sister city in Norway, visiting a lot of the different downtown activities, whether it was gathering spaces, whether it was even just the makeup of kind of their commercial district, business district, not only in Cheyenne, but every single community that we visited. Some were size of Minot, some were the size of Williston, some were the size of Stanley, and then, of course, Oslo. It's really difficult to compare Oslo to Minot, seeing as hundreds, 650,000 people versus us. But to the, I think looking at Cheyenne specifically, because of its really parallel path, I think, in its general makeup, they took their downtown with a little bit different aspect, but one thing I took away that seemed very interesting to me, and it kind of resonated to take a look at some other cities that I've visited in the past, and it really didn't, I think, hit the bell that it had happened, but they had taken some of their old alleyways that, for the lack of a better term, and sealed them off, and they became mini gathering spaces, mini bistros year-round with outdoor heaters, and had taken a different approach on some of the existing space that they have. Now, granted, that created, I'm sure, some obstacles of whether it was garbage or infrastructure with electric power lines and things like that, but they managed to figure that out. So that there are different opportunities, even with what we have existing. I think taking some of the best from what other communities have done, and that has happened in other areas of the United States. We're not just identifying one country specifically, but as we move forward, I would like to, specifically even with the Trinity concept, think kind of that outside the box on what we might be able to look at for possibilities down the road that don't exist and that might fill some of the gaps or several of the gaps that were identified within the white papers that were delivered. The last point that I wanted to just touch on briefly, only because it resurfaced again recently, regarding the economic development position within the city of Minot. I know that there's some folks out there that still don't quite have an understanding of what it is or why that the city is developing that position. And the way that I've been describing is that through all of the white papers that came, through all the steering committees, is we've identified a gap with small and existing business. And it really came down to a lot of fingers pointing to the city of Minot as an easy opportunity not only to fill that gap, but also help facilitate a hub and spoke mentality where if somebody comes into our community and doesn't know where to go, what to do, they contact the city in a lot of other instances around the country. And in many of those instances, there is an economic development component. Now, with MADC already full in existence, up and operating with its successes moving forward, Souris Basin and the Bank of North Dakota's resources and many other resources that we have around the community, we identified that we can fill a small gap within that component. And in all of those other circumstances, help directly facilitate immediately to the other economic development entities that exist without getting somebody lost in the shuffle. And that's really what we've kind of heard in the past. If you're coming into the community and don't know where to go, well, you were made a recommendation over here, well, that wasn't exactly right, or that they didn't even know how to reach out to them or move through that process quickly. Aside from that, working with Brian and helping identify some of the challenges that maybe we have within our existing, within our ordinances or code, that we can help evolve those where they are necessary to, I think, better facilitate economic development or make the community more business friendly as we work through the process. So I think helping identify that with more people and continually, that this isn't about, to be blunt, the city attempting to take over any other avenue, but to fill the gap that's been identified and help, I think, facilitate through our community more directly the economic development component. It's certainly not going to be a very large component, but an important piece that's existing there. We're at 10:07, so we've got about 20 minutes left of any questions or open discussion. John, you're waiting on bated breath.
I was. Once you brought up your trip to Norway, I just want to thank you two guys for taking the 12 days away from work and away from family to go and represent us in Norway. Really appreciate that. Good work. Also want to thank you guys and the entire city council for, I went to the town hall meeting at Perkett, probably what, 3-4 weeks ago now. I want to tell you guys that was an excellent outreach, and I think you should repeat it. Tom, you did a great job emceeing and discussing things. Mayor and all 6 aldermen spoke, and every person that spoke, even including our city engineer, Lance Meyer, every single person that spoke was professional, delivered information that was vitally important to the citizens. I sat in the back row and with the idea of watching the attitude of the citizenry, and I would say over that brief 2-hour period, I watched those citizens go from, well, we have these concerns, to what can we do? Thank you, City of Minot, for doing what you're doing, and what can we do to help? It was really fun to watch that. So my message here is, number one, please do that. Please do that again many times all over the city, and we'll try to get as many citizens as we can because it's such a good program. And number two, for those of us in the room that didn't have an opportunity, it's well worth it. And so thank you for that as well.
Appreciate that, John. And just a brief follow-up on that is we are anticipating many more of those town halls, not only in this year, but years to come as continued outreach through the different quadrants of the city. Thank you. Last chance for further discussion, Lindsay.
I just thought it would be important for people to know that the Governor's Main Street Initiative is holding a regional meeting here in Minot on July 9th. An invitation was sent out, and I think, Tom, you must have shared it because we had some other folks who RSVP'd to that. So Tom has the invite, I have the invite with the info. If you did not get that and you would like it, please let us know. We are simply helping find some locations and helping a little bit with content, but it's the governor's, his office. We are inviting cities from Region 1 and 2, so we were lucky enough to be able to host it here in Minot with Region 2. And then the next day, on July 10th, there's a Brownfields workshop. We are inviting EPA, the North Dakota Department of Health. There's lots and lots of different resources that are coming. registration is limited to 30, and we already have 22 people signed up within a week of putting it out. So if you want to go, please go and register. And then on August 1st and 2nd, Souris Basin is putting on a Creative Economy Summit. And it's going to be packed full of arts and culture, but we also are using the word creative. This is what made me think with what Sean was kind of talking about. We also want to look at what are some creative ways for us to utilize resources that we already have or buildings that we already have. Who are some of our creative entrepreneurs who are doing things differently? It's not just the, they're doing it a little bit more creatively. And we have to have those examples out there, especially for our rural communities. So August 1st and 2nd, we'll be sending out some more information on that this week via email. So please watch for that as well.
Thank you, Lindsay. So where we go from here is the technical teams will continue to meet and will continue to work forward. We anticipate in the next 3 months approximately to bring the stakeholder group back together. The hope is that we don't shrink anymore. As a matter of fact, I would encourage everyone here to reach out to some of those folks who were initially concerned and invite them back into the discussion so that we can keep the momentum moving forward, and that understandably we're all working, and it's the morning of the start of the business week, but we can certainly make sure that the main players that need to be within the community and those who maybe don't even understand fully what is going on, so that we can continue to keep the information flowing throughout the different sectors within the community. The steering committee will once again meet, even a couple of times before then, we hope, to continue to work on some of the other aspects and within those toolboxes and white papers that have come through, and then bring that back to the full stakeholders committee after those have been either started on or completed. Any final questions or thoughts before we go our separate ways on this Monday morning? Thank you again, everyone, for being here. I appreciate all of your time and effort through this process and moving forward. And Ryan, I want to chat with you just briefly. Thank you.